Hello, Editing Rachel here, making a preemptive announcement. I said at the end of my last video, my August book haul, that my next video should be my August reading wrap-up. But I like to put my literary newsletter links in my reading wrap-ups, and I haven't finished my newsletter yet. So I've decided to go ahead and post another video first, since I've already pre-filmed it. And this is my MockReads video, my final 2024 one for fantasy, both adult and YA. Hope you enjoy. Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my 2024 MockReads TBR list for fantasy, both adult and YA fantasy. My MockReads reading lists, and I will link the others I made this year down below, is my response to the Goodreads Choice Awards. Back in the day, the first round of the Goodreads Choice Awards was a write-in round where you could write in anything you want, but they did away with that to, I guess, make things easier for themselves. But I don't always read the buzziest books. More than that, really, I don't read a lot of front list, but I want to because just in case, I'd like to participate in the Goodreads Choice Awards and also just keep a little bit of a pulse on, buzzy or otherwise front list titles. So these MockReads lists I make are my way of providing myself a TBR that I hope to get to, by the end of October or maybe a little bit into November. We shall see. Time is getting a little short, and in fact, I'm going to mention some YA fantasy books that caught my fancy in this video, but I don't think I'll be reading them in 2024. I'm just going to go put that, subsection into 2025 reading. That's how overwhelmed I am by reading. And in fact, there's a lot of books I'm going to mention now, but my goal is always just to get to 3 of them. And then my MockReads post, which I'll make on my blog in October or November, is basically a tier ranking per genre of the 3 books I've read in each genre. So yeah, there we have it. If you enjoy fantasy, I hope you might be intrigued by some of the books I'm about to mention. I have, in fact, mentioned most of these books in other videos, but I wanted to start with one that's brand new, and that is The Sins on Their Bones by Laura R. Samotin, which I found out about at random, which is exciting, like in an unusual way for me, through a blogger who I follow. And so I'll link her blog down below. And this is Jewish romantasy. And I read a fair bit of Jewish fantasy. You'll see it crop up a lot later. But I don't read a whole lot of romantasy, so this was, an interesting new take. We're in a secondary world in this book, and it's sort of based off of Imperial Russia, except that the Jewish coded religion is sort of the one that's in charge. The main couple, well, there's an abusive main couple, Dmitri, who was the deposed Tsar, and then the husband who deposed him, Alexei, who fell prey or, got more invested in holy science and started talking to a demon who he was sure was God, puffing up his ego. Alexei's an abusive character as it is, relatively one-dimensional, and the major plot is Dmitri and his friends, including his new lover Vasily, taking back the kingdom and saving everyone from Alexei and his evil, cruel magic ways. But actually, another aspect of this book is that Alexei is trying to wipe out sort of the earlier ritualistic-based religious elements of this Jewish coded religion. And the author was very inspired, apparently, by the Enlightenment, and which in European, especially Central and Eastern European Jewish discourse, that was what saw the rise of the Reform movement, and maybe a little bit of the doing away of some of the more, superstition and talisman and mystical forms of Judaism. I feel like, when it comes to like superstition and talismans, that's more like folk, Judaism that's, less publicly inscribed because it's not practiced by men as much, I think. But I think she went down some intriguing rabbit holes for that. I don't necessarily think it played out all that well, how she translated it into her world building, which in and of itself was relatively scant. And I had other issues really with this story as well, but I was glad to give it a go. So that's my first adult fantasy that I have read. My second adult fantasy I've read is The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo, which was my foray into reading this very popular, mostly YA fantasy writer. But this story that she wrote was based off of her Sephardi history. Her family were Jews who left Spain after the expulsion. Some of the family remained in Spain as conversos, meaning they were forced to convert to Catholicism. And in this story, Bardugo imagines a future for them, and we're in the real world, just like with a couple magical twists. And in all honesty, the magical rules didn't make a huge amount of sense. It started out very small and then suddenly the characters could basically do anything. But I do feel like the world building, as in how it interacted with the real history, was intriguing, and the characters were fun to follow. And this, of course, will be a very buzzy book. I'll be interested to see how it does at the Goodreads Choice Awards. The next adult fantasy book I own is Relics of Ruin by Erin M. Evans. This is a sequel to a book I read a couple years ago, or last year, something anyway. This is a non-Jewish inspired fantasy book, but it is, the fantasy system is based on libraries and on museum culture, and also the magic is sort of propelled by touching elements, and which archivists can do, and then they can take in that power, and there's a little bit of anxiety commentary in that as well. And there's also some rich world building about various cultural groups in the secondary world who have been basically forced into one kingdom, or part of the empire as it were, and they all have to learn to live together, and there's political intrigue and stuff like that, which I find the most interesting. I think on the outskirts there is also kind of like zombie-esque stuff, which might come more into play in this book, or hopefully will stay with the relics. And it's just really exciting. I really love this particular focus on culture in these books. I'm also excited to get to the sequel of The Pomegranate Gate by Ariel Kaplan, which isn't out yet, but I'm just gonna hold up the first book, and I'm hoping to get the cover of the second book that'll look like this. There's a couple covers I think that are rolling around out there. But anyway, this is also Sephardi-based Inquisition era fantasy, which takes place in the real world, but in this series there is a portal world, and it gets into other parts of Jewish mythology, and we have characters going back and forth between the worlds, yeah, I'm very intrigued to see how the machinations in the portal world might in fact have some influence on real history in the real world. We'll have to see. Other adult fantasy books I have mentioned before is A Dark and Drowning Tide by Alison Saft, which is her first foray, I think, into adult fantasy, and it also will have some Jewish elements to it, so of course I was intrigued. I enjoyed her YA fantasy that delved into some Jewish elements and some unusual history, I think, when it comes to bringing Judaism into fantasy. We also have The Gods Below by Andrea Stewart, which is the start of her brand new fantasy series, and I enjoyed her first series, The Bone Chart, which started with the Bone Chart daughter, so I'm eager to give this one a go. I do like and am intrigued by the ways that fantasy authors might deal with religion and gods, not just Jewish-inspired ones, but in general. And I guess that also brings me to the final book I'll mention for adult fantasy, which is The Lotus Empire by Tasha Suri, which is based off of Indian mythology. And this book will be closing out the series, so very excited to be able to finally wrap up this story and see what happens with the two leads and the rich, world building behind them. Okay, and finally a quick note about some of the YA fantasy that caught my fancy. We have the sequel to This Dark Descent by Kalyn Josephson coming out relatively soon, which will continue the story, which takes place in a Jewish-inspired secondary fantasy world where there is horse racing and other political machinations going on, and some golem magic as well. And we have some characters who are sort of in hiding as the Jewish-coded people in a bigoted world who may hopefully get their due in some way or another, or, strengthen some bonds of friendship between some, compelling characters. We shall see. Another new YA fantasy series in the works is HEIR by Sabaa Tahir. This is the start of a new fantasy series from her. She wrote the Ember and the Ashes fantasy series, which I very much enjoyed. I thought there were some really, really compelling characters in that one, and because of that, I'm curious to see where she goes next. And the final book I'll mention again here, which I mentioned in my mid-year check-in freakout, is Night Owls by A.R. Vishny, which is a book that deals with Jewish vampires, the way that Judaism has coded vampires. I believe it takes place in a 20th century U.S. setting, but I will very much try to get through this book in 2025, if not earlier, and report back then. And that about covers it for me now. I will leave Goodreads links for all of these books listed down below if you'd like some more information. I also hope to be back on this channel in the near future with my monthly Author's Answer video, which was started by J.D. Archer, an author tuber, and his writing group, a series of reading and writing related questions for writers. And I'd love to hear what 2024 releases, in fantasy or otherwise, have caught your fancy this year. And thanks for watching, everyone. I'll see you next time.